welcome to our YouTube channel. So today we will be discussing about the various theorists that are associated with new criticism. So in the previous video we discussed about new criticism. We studied how new criticism talks about the close reading about the text, how text as an entity is self-sufficient. You do not have to pay much heed or focus on the various factors that are very exterior to the text, and whatever is written on the piece of paper is more important. As F.R. Lewis directly talks about it, he said that whatever is written on the page, that is way more important than anything else, right? So these new critics were paying more and more focus on the text as a whole entity and how important it is to maintain unity. There are major theorists who talked about various concepts that are there in your new criticism. Today we are going to talk about the theorists and the works that are written by them. So we have William Empson. William Empson has written this very important work, The 7 Types of Ambiguity. The 7 Types of Ambiguity. We have another work, Some Versions of Pastoral, that came out. Some versions of pastorals that came out in 1935. Then we have Milton's God, 1961. We have The Texture of Complex Words, that was there in 1951. So these are the works by William Empson, who's very famous for what? He's very famous for the 7 types of ambiguity that are there in the text. And why the reading is important? It is important why ambiguity is important? Because it gives you better understanding. You have to avoid these ambiguities, and when you do that, there is a better understanding of the text that you can get. Then we have I.A. Richards. I.A. Richards' work, we have Meaning of Meanings, 1923. Principles of Literary Criticism, an important work. Principles of Literary Criticism, 1942. Then we have Practical Criticism. Practical Criticism, a very, very important work. This work came out in 1929. It is a work that I.A. Richards is most famous for, where he talks about the close reading and analysis of the text. Then we have Philosophy of Rhetoric, 1936. Coleridge on Imagination, 1935. We have Science and Poetry, 1926. So Much Nearer, Essays Toward a World English, that is there written in 1968. So these are the works by I.A. Richards. Then we have Cleanth Brooks. Cleanth Brooks wrote these works like Modern Poetry and Tradition in 1939. The Well-Wrought Urn, that is there, the full title is Well-Wrought Urn, Studies in the Structure of Poetry. It came out in 1947. Cleanth Brooks का ये work है 1947, and in this work he talks about the heresy of paraphrase, the concept of heresy of paraphrase. Then we have F.R. Lewis. F.R. Lewis, who wrote this work, The Great Tradition, in 1948. In 1948. Then we have V.K. Wimsett. That the work is Verbal Icon, Studies in the Meaning of Poetry. That was written in 1954. Hateful Contraries, Studies in Literature and Criticism. In 1965, this work came out. And Literary Criticism, A Short History, this work came out in 1957. So these are the important works. The Verbal Icon is the most important work by V.K. Wimsett. Then we have M.C. Bresley. He has written works like Practical Logic, Aesthetics, and Aesthetics, A Short History. So Practical Logic in 1950, Aesthetics in 1958. We have Aesthetics, A Short History in 1966. Then Ellen Tate, someone who talks about tensions in poetry. He has written this work, A Man of Letters in the Modern World. and there he talks about the concept of tensions in poetry. Last but not the least, the most important one who actually coined and used this word new criticism is J.C. Ransom, John Crowe Ransom. He has written works like Poem About God, 1919, Chills and Fever, 1924, Grace After Meat, 1924, Two Gentlemen in Bonds, 1927, Selected Poems, 1963. New Criticism, very important work, 1941. World's Body, 1938. God Without Thunder. This is the full title in An Unorthodox Defense of Orthodox in 1967. God Under Thunder, An Unorthodox Defense of Orthodox. And last is the essay poetry, A Note on Ontology, right? So what is ontology? We discussed about this in the previous video, that the poetry also came from, it has its origin, it has its birth, that is ontology. So before J.C. Ransom, there were people who started to talk and to read the works in the manner which the new critics were doing. They were doing some close analysis, they were reading the text. For example, I.A. Richards, how he started to read, there was this experiment that he was doing with his students, and he actually gave lectures about it. He gave them a piece of paper, a poetry, and to read it, and they were analyzing it, and they wrote about their own interpretations related to that work. This is how he started to teach people how to read whatever is written on the paper only. So close reading, practical criticism is something that started there, and I.A. Richard is very important for that. He started to read, he started to describe the things in the manner which the new critics were doing. But it is J.C. Ransom who actually came, and then in his essay New Criticism used this term new criticism. What are the tenets of new criticism? You have to look at the text in a greater closeness. You have to have a very practical approach. You have to look for the tensions, ambiguity, the unity that are there in the text. All the things that are exterior to it do not matter. Whatever you see on the sheet of paper, on the page, whatever words you have to interpret it. And the content and the form, both are important. Not only the form, not only the metaphors, metonymy, not only those things are important. Not only the figure of speeches, not only the literariness of the words are important, but the content is also important. But the biographical details of the writer or the historical references, these things are not important, right? So let us quickly revise what we discussed. So as I told you, there are various theorists who talked about new criticism. Firstly, we have William Empson, whose work 7 Types of Ambiguity and Milton's God, you have to remember. Then we have I.A. Richards, Meaning of Meanings, Principle of Literary Criticism, Practical Criticism. And these 3 works are very important, and you have to remember it with the dates, because in Match the Following they can ask this. Then we have Cleanth Brooks, someone who talks about paradox, and he also talks about the heresy of paraphrase. What is heresy of paraphrase? So he is saying that it is not good to paraphrase the text in the poetry that is there, because you cannot compress it. You cannot compress everything, because the writer wants to tell you, wants you to feel whatever he or she is writing. So it is a heresy that you do when you paraphrase the things. You actually are doing a misact. It's a misconduct that you do when you do paraphrasing. The Well-Wrought Urn is the exceptional work that he has done, and he discusses about Wordsworth's poetry there in the essay, The Well-Wrought Urn. Then we have F.R. Lewis, who has written The Great Tradition. I have seen detailed questions being asked from it. So it is important to read and know the date when this work was written by F.R. Lewis. Then we have Wimsett, W.K. Wimsett. He is someone who has written Verbal Icon. He is famous for the work Verbal Icon, the studies in the meaning of poetry, that came out in 1954. Then we have M.C. Bretzley. He has written Practical Logic. They both talk about the intentions or the mistakes that you can do when you are reading the text. Both of them are important when it comes to new criticism. We will discuss about them in greater detail in the coming videos. Then we have Ellen Tate, who talks about tensions in the poetry. In the work, The Man of Letters in the Modern World, he talked about it. Then J.C. Ransom, we have already discussed about him. He gave the word the new criticism and talked about ontology, right? So thank you so much for attending this video, looking at it. If you have any doubt, you can ask me that in the comment section and I'll surely reply to you. Thank you so much.